Hi, I'm Derek, and on this episode of Air Capital Hot Rods Garage, we're going to take the Chevelle for a drive. Alright guys, like I said, by the end of this video, we're going to be driving the Chevelle, I hope. As you saw in the last video, we got our LS engine running. Made a new list here, of course, and of things we need to do before we actually drive it. So, still haven't hooked up that shifter cable. The parking brake cable needs hooked up. I removed the parking brake pedal to get some wires and stuff through the floor and carpet and stuff, so I had to take that out. Need to work on some tuning. Before I put my drive shaft in, I'm going to put in a new transmission output seal just because it's easy and it's there and everything. The ECM bracket and the fuse box bracket, which actually already got done. Need to cover up the wiring, put the hood on. I want to put a resistor in my check engine light. So at least the other day when it was running, it was on very dimly. So I'm hoping by putting a resistor on there, it'll be off. Got to cover up the wiring. So I got the wiring here where I had to tear it apart looking for my wiring errors. Ended up being in the actual fuse block itself. Secure the fuel lines. So right now they're just kind of flopped up there and kind of strung along the frame rail, maybe with some zip ties here or there. I got some clamps and stuff that I'm actually going to secure them properly. Same thing with the transmission cooler lines. And then you may have noticed in the last video also, which there'd be a link right here. My ignition switch, sometimes when I go to the start position, it's not starting. And I replaced the ignition switch a few weeks ago with one that's keyed to the doors and the trunk and everything. And for some reason it's not engaging properly, so I don't know if I missed a part or if the previous owner missed a part and I didn't realize that there was a part missing, or what the problem is. So I'm going to try to dig into that. That may or may not prevent me from driving it, but it's on the to-do list here. I did get the exhaust welded up, and so it's much quieter. The open headers was kind of fun, but obviously not practical for daily driving and everything. So yeah, so we got some work to do here, and then we'll take it for a test drive. So obviously the engine runs. I don't know about the transmission. I got that transmission from the salvage yard out of a 1994 3/4 ton Chevy pickup. I walked by it, found it was a 4L80E, and said, aha, and I ripped it out. So I have no history on it. It was $160, so which is pretty cheap even for a core for a 4L80E, and that's why I picked it up. I figured go ahead and throw it in here, and worst case scenario is it needs rebuilt. So it still has a stock converter and stock transmission. So yeah, we're going to see if it works. I hope it does. And eventually I'm going to get a different torque converter for it, and at minimum do some sort of shift kit if not do a rebuild on it. That's kind of hopefully on down the road later on, and maybe next winter's project. I don't know, but I'm hoping to be able to drive it this summer and spring and fall and everything in its current configuration. So just to get this bad boy on the road and along the way. So this is kind of cool. For my ECM here, I got these brackets off of eBay, but they have LSX cut into them, and on this side too, but unfortunately I had to mount my fuse box to it. So but that's secured, you know. I also took the top of this off and painted it because it just, you know, looked a little bit better. And that's secure there. Got my air filter in place, my coolant overflow jug. So yeah. Another thing, I kind of mentioned it, I think, in the last video. I couldn't get my number 2 fan to work. So on a truck ECM, obviously it doesn't have electric fans, and you tap the wire for that fan into the AC recirc pin on the ECM. And so what you have to do is you run your wiring and everything, but then you also have to go into the HP Tuner program and switch that from AC recirc to fan so that the ECM knows what it's doing. So that's why it was sending out that odd signal. It wasn't an actual wiring issue, it was a programming issue. So I got that running. That one has always ran fine. So that's great. Engine, it's running. You know, I don't have tons of experience tuning engines. So it's going to be a learning curve. I watched some videos on YouTube, of course. You know, I learn stuff on YouTube just like you guys do. So I got some little tips and tricks on how to tune it. I'm probably not going to videotape that because, one, I don't want to look like an idiot because I don't know what I'm doing exactly. And two, there's a lot of videos out there of people that have a lot more experience than I do. So go watch their videos, not mine. So that's on tuning cars anyway. So I'm going to do my best. Right now I don't have the drive shaft, so I can't even really put it in gear to have a load to tune the, you know, in gear idle. But I have some ideas on what I need to start with. So I'm going to get the drive shaft made up hopefully this week. And yeah, get going on this list. All right, everybody, I'm working on a little bit more problems here. So if you saw in the last video, when I tried starting up the engine, I was having a heck of a time getting the key to work. And it's actually gotten worse. So when you turn the key to the start position, nothing's happening. And so I have a suspicion of what the problem is. I basically have to tear the whole steering column apart. But let me describe what happens. So when you turn the key here, the actual electrical switch that sends the power to the starter and to the relays to power everything, it's not actually in the steering column here. It's down there. So right there. And so when you turn the key here, there's a little gear inside there, and then there's a rod, and that rod is right there, and then it engages the switch and stuff. And if you see here, I'm turning the key and nothing's happening with that rod. So I got to tear the steering column apart here and maybe replace the gear, or apparently somehow it can get off a tooth or something like that. So I don't really know what the problem is for sure, because obviously I haven't torn apart the steering column yet, but that's my suspicion, especially since this rod down here isn't even moving. So it's really frustrating though when trying to, my buddy was over here the other day, I was trying to fire up the engine for him. It's like, and it won't work. So yeah, we're gonna tear this apart. All right, guys, we're getting really close here. Got my drive shaft made up because I got my slip yoke the other day. So I got that all made up. It's just about ready to go in. I just put a new seal in the back of the transmission. So I'm going to throw this in, and then going to put the hood on, and then hopefully I'm going to go try to take it for a test drive. Got a little bit of worries. So this transmission, again, it's out of the junkyard. I don't even know if it's going to go in gear. So I'd really like to go take it for a test drive. Worked on the tuning a little bit. I got it so that it would idle. Obviously, I haven't put it in gear because there's nothing to give it any resistance or anything. So, you know, I don't know how it's going to go. Did get an important part right there. Oh, yeah. And then I did have to modify a few things. When I was working on the tuning a little bit, if you remember, my mass airflow sensor was up here. And it seemed to be giving some bad readings and stuff. So I made a little spacer here and then moved the mass airflow sensor down here. As you can see, that's not a banded clamp. That is a piece of Gorilla Tape. But, you know, for temporary, that'll work until I can actually get a coupler. So, yeah, it's a little sloppy mechanic action right there. So, we're going to throw the drive shaft in and see how it goes. All right, guys. I've been doing a lot of work off of camera. Sorry I haven't got to film some of this. A lot of it is just really monotonous, boring stuff, and you wouldn't really be able to see, so I figured, what's the point of videoing it? I don't want to bore you. So, got the shifter cable done. The parking brake cable, apparently I'm missing one of the metal clips that kind of help support it, so that's not done. It's hanging up there, so it's not going to drag on the ground or anything. I'll get to that later. I don't need it to drive it. Put the parking brake pedal in. The tuning, I'm working on that. More on that in just a minute. Got a new drive shaft and put an output seal in the transmission before I put the drive shaft in. ECM bracket. Mounted the fuse block. Covered up the wiring. Got the hood on and it clears the intake. Mil resistor. So when I'm just driving, have it running, the light is dimly on. I gotta put a resistor in there, hopefully. Doesn't affect anything. Cover more wiring. Secured the fuel line. Got some little brackets, screwed them into the frame and everything, so they're not flopping around. Same thing with the transmission cooler lines. I fixed that ignition switch, and then obviously measured for the drive shaft. So, look, most everything's checked off. And guess what? I actually drove this. Yeah! Unfortunately, it was dark out, so filming it you would have seen black. And I didn't drive it very far. Really, I wanted to make sure that the transmission was going to work. The tuning needs work. I mean, it drove. I got on it maybe 40-50% throttle, and when it shifted, it popped and pinged and misfired. So learn a couple things here about tuning, watching lots of YouTube videos to learn, doing a bunch of reading. I ordered new spark plugs. So these spark plugs, I just reused them from when I got the engine. I went ahead and got new spark plugs. Also, this tensioner here, it's making some noise, so I got a new one of those. So on the tuning, with the mass airflow sensor plugged in, it's like my long-term fuel trims are like positive 25, which means that the engine's trying to add as much fuel as it can to get it into correct ratio. And then when I unplug the MAF, so it defaults into speed density, it's negative. It's not negative 25, but it's negative something. So got something going on. I kind of have a suspicion that it may be a vacuum leak. So I ordered new intake gaskets too. These gaskets are supposed to be reusable, but you know, when I put this on, the gaskets, they're rubber O-rings on those gaskets, and they are like really flat, so like when you bolt it down, I didn't think there'd be much compression there. So that's my suspicion. I'm going to change out the gaskets and see if that fixes it. Otherwise, I've been reading about mass airflow sensor tuning and VE table tuning, and I'm not going to film that because you don't want to take advice from me. I hope I don't blow up the engine. So also working on getting the correct transmission level, fluid level in there. So that's what the funnel's sticking in there for, because you know, you add a half a quart, and then if you go check it right away, it's like, well, the whole damn dipstick is covered. So that's where we're at on there. It runs and it drives, moves under its own power, just not real great. So got more work to do on the tuning. So reading and watching about the tuning, you know, it has oxygen sensors from the factory, one on either side. Since I don't have cats, I don't have the real ones. And they're narrow band, so that means that they're tuned or designed to read at stoichiometric air fuel ratio, 14.7 to 1. It's great for tuning. They're not so great. So here's my dash setup. So there's my dash with gauges on it. So that's torque running, and so I got my fuel gauge over here, obviously, and these other gauges and blah blah blah. And so this has a tack on it, but it reacts pretty slow. But I still got a tack down there, still got my oil pressure gauge down there. The temperature gauge not plugged in, so I have a temperature gauge here, and then I can add in a wideband gauge. And you know, you can configure this however you want. And I got the key horsepower meter here, which you know, has an accelerometer from the tablet, and then you enter in the car weight and everything, and that's how it calculates that. So right now, my USB cable here that powers this, I've just been plugging it into the stereo. Eventually, I was thinking about making a 3D printed kind of housing for this, and then wiring it, kind of a hardwired power into the car with a switched source. And then I think there's a way you can set this up so that it turns on and off when it's charging, aka powers on, and it'll automatically launch in Torque app. And then I got this module from Amazon, BAFX products, that gives it a Bluetooth signal that this is picking up. So I had another one of these, I mean, similar idea, and it was kind of finicky connecting and stuff. So this one seems to connect pretty quickly and reliably. Of course, I've had it for just a short period of time, so to be determined how good this really is. So that's it for tonight. All right, here we go. Test driving the Chevelle. This is actually the second test drive. So I got the HP tuner going, so I can monitor my gauges. My first test drive was okay, but my long-term fuel trims were like 25 and not real good. So what I kind of figured out was I had a vacuum leak. So I changed out the intake manifold gasket as well as the valley pan gasket, and right now my long-term fuel trims are between 0 and 5. So really pretty good. Alright, I think that just about wraps up our 6-liter swap into our 1971 Chevelle. If you didn't follow along, click on the playlist and you can watch all of it. So I put a 6-liter LQ4 into my 1971 Chevelle along with a 1994 4L80E. I do have a few little things to finish up. I got quite a bit of tuning to do. I'm working on putting in a wideband oxygen sensor just to finish it up, and then that's about it on the engine side of things. Follow along, like and subscribe to see the rest of the work on the Chevelle. So some of my future plans are, I'm going to lower it down. I already have lowering springs for the back. I'm going to get some front spindles for the front. I'm going to put a vintage air system into it for the air conditioning. And I'm going to do the interior. I might even get into some fun, neat little play around stuff with a Raspberry Pi touchscreen and maybe some gauges and stuff using a touchscreen or something. I'm not 100% sure, but body work is going to be definitely a big chore. So, but the engine seems to run fine and be a solid unit. So, oh, and I am going to take it to the track and see how it runs.